Rick was a typical representative of the golden youth, but that was only at first glance. A nice apartment, an expensive car, a fashionable haircut, and an unusual outfit caused a lot of gossip. But as soon as he arrived at work, a complete transformation occurred. Of all the above, only the haircut remained, and it was often hidden under a doctor's cap. Yes, that's right. Rick was the head of the pediatric department at a large multidisciplinary hospital. The first shock for the parents was the profession their son had chosen. Given his not-so-quiet and exemplary youth, the choice was more than strange. But they reasoned like this: whatever the boy chooses, as long as he doesn't do something serious. And they were not ready to lose their only beloved son. For a year, they watched how Rick studied, exchanging surprised glances, and waited for him to get tired. He didn't get tired. After brilliantly completing the first year, their son went on vacation abroad. He returned from there with shining eyes. "Dad, you can't imagine what level medicine is at there. Uncle arranged to spend a few days in the pediatrics department. It's an incredible thing. One day I'll be a super doctor like him." The parents exchanged glances again. Can a person change so much in just one moment? That's when the father said, "If you hold out another year, I'll send you to study abroad. My son must receive the best education." He had to keep his word. Rick returned with a diploma, 1,000 ideas, and a huge desire to cure all the children of the world. During a festive dinner, to which several potential brides disguised as the daughters of friends were invited, the father made an offer to Rick. "Son, I respect your opinion. I am very happy that a doctor has appeared in our family, but you understand that you cannot work in an ordinary hospital." Rick, who was busy talking to one of the girls, looked at his father with interest. "Very interesting. And why?" "Well, firstly, you won't earn anything there. Secondly, why bother with children? They are all taken there, and believe me, there are many more from disadvantaged families. Any normal parent will send their child to a regular hospital." Rick smiled. "Dad, I will work in a regular hospital. Firstly, because that is where I can develop in different areas. And children are not to blame for what their parents are like." For the first time, his father didn't insist, and Rick spoke with a smile as he watched the spark of interest in the eyes of the invited girls disappear. He worked for almost 2 years, you could say, in the front line. Well, mainly in the emergency room. All kinds of children passed through his hands, and the director of the hospital told him the right thing. "Until you learn not to let the pain of children pass through you, you will not become a good doctor. A doctor must have a cool head to make a correct diagnosis." Now Rick understood what they were telling him then. At first, he wanted to cry every time a child was brought in a critical condition. But then, he was able to control himself. After all, in such a state, you can't properly bandage or give an injection. Now he was worried too, but he didn't let his heart relax. Literally 3 months ago, the director called him into his office. "Sit down, Rick." Rick sat down. The hospital director was known for being fair but tough enough. Often, those who entered his office expecting praise left there without a job. Rick tried to remember what mistake he had made. Nothing serious, at least that's what he thought. "Rick, how are you doing here?" "Everything is fine, Lucas. I like everything, and everything pleases me." The older man smiled. "You're the first I've heard say that in years. Usually everyone dislikes something, be it the salary or the schedule. Everything is going well for me. I've heard about your successes, about you taking on-call shifts, in addition to your regular shifts. In short, there are only positive comments. You know, when I hired you, I was sure you'd be gone in a month. I even made a bet with one of the supervisors, but I lost. So what I'm getting at, the head of your department is retiring. We need someone who can not only manage the department, but also be a good doctor. I checked everyone, and I'm sure no one but you can handle this role." Honestly, Rick was puzzled. Becoming the boss at 30 was not bad at all, but the problem was that he did not consider himself the best. There were doctors who worked better than him and, of course, were more experienced. I've already signed the order, so from tomorrow, come directly to your office. They will change the badge today. Not much time passed since then. It seemed to Rick that he had always been the boss here. At first, his father kept trying to transfer him to a private clinic, but when his son became the boss, he sighed and said, "Tell me what you need. I'll be the sponsor of your department." Rick hugged his father tightly. "Dad, honestly, I need everything. But I'll be happy with any help." The department soon became a model, exemplary, the best. Now, even the parents of the most precious children thought twice about where to take their children, to a private clinic or here, although there was not much to be surprised about. Rick's father was a man of his word, and in a short time, the department not only had new equipment, but also a good renovation and even a huge screen in the playroom. Only that doctors in ordinary work did it by vocation, while in the private clinic, the children of rich parents who got their education with money worked. It was already spring outside. Rex went out into the street earlier than usual, thinking once again that his mother's morning calls were as refreshing as a cold shower. The song was the same as always, "Dear son, you are over 30 now, and you are still not married." Then came long lists of those who already had grandchildren, then those who already had children. And for dessert, those who had at least found their other half. Rick had neither the first, nor the second, nor the third, and his mother asked, "What's wrong, son?" He couldn't tell his mother that all these conversations were already overwhelming him. So he listened patiently, sometimes giving some signs of life. Rick had girlfriends, a promising, resourceful boyfriend, and an intelligent woman. But if the relationships went beyond just spending a few nights together, everyone seemed to start making plans about how he would quit the hospital and open his own clinic. Rick honestly didn't understand why he should do that. He loved his job and didn't want to trade it for anything else. Mutual understanding would fade away immediately, and another number would be deleted from the phone book. With the last one, named Aria, he even had to have a little scandal. She was a very striking and attractive brunette, accustomed to male attention. She knew exactly what she wanted from life. At that moment, she wanted to be Rick's wife. When he noticed Aria was slowly moving his belongings, he left her immediately, but the girl didn't calm down. Rick never understood how she managed to make spare copies of keys, but a week later, when he came home, he found Aria waiting for him, just as she came into the world. He was furious. He had planned a football night on TV, but he had to deal with that insistent woman and then change the lock on the front door. Rick parked. There were few cars. As always, he was one of the first. "Reg!" He turned around. John was standing near the car. "I see you're an early riser. Don't you like to get there right on time?" And he really didn't. Before he went on his rounds, he always asked the nurses what had happened during the night, which children had slept badly, who didn't eat well at dinner, who cried and asked for their mother. The nurses in his department were wonderful, and if he met one who wasn't interested in how a child had slept at night, he immediately dismissed her from his department. "Good morning, Lucas, the early riser." The hospital director laughed. I heard. "Rick, I think God sent you. Did something happen?" "Well, I can't say that anything happened, but I really need your help. Yesterday, a friend of mine called me asking me to help his niece. She came from some village and has been studying medicine for 3 years now. Well, as you can imagine, to become a pediatrician. My friend says that the girl is very intelligent. She studies seriously and doesn't sit idly by. She wants to be independent. Uncle tries to help her financially, of course. But apart from living in a student residence, she doesn't accept any help. The only thing she asked her uncle during this time was to find her some part-time work. Until the end of the year on weekends, and also at night. And in summer, any hours. I wanted to ask you to find a place for her in your department. Lucas, this is what I needed. As you know, my department is full of young girls. Spring has begun. Everyone wants to have free weekends, days off for personal business, and there is no one to replace them. Send her to me. We will talk. I think everything will work out. Thank you for this. My friend is older. We have been friends since childhood. I can't seem to deny him anything, and I don't understand how to help. So, we will have to move someone. It won't be necessary to move anyone. The girls will be delighted. He walked around the department, entered the room of those who were admitted yesterday. He calmed down a crying girl. It was her third time there, and she still hadn't gotten used to being without her mother. Then he returned to his office to prepare for the round. Almost immediately, there was a knock on the door. Yes, come in. A wonderful miracle enters the office because there was no other name for this apparition. A young girl of average height. You can't say she's overweight, but everything is in its place. But that wasn't the main thing. On the girl's head was a mass of red hair. Of course, they were gathered in a braid, but even he could see how the hair wanted to break free. In combination with her bright green eyes and swollen, very tempting lips, all this was simply murderous. Hello, Lucas sent me. And at that moment, the girl blushed intensely. Rick looked at her with surprised eyes, even forgetting that he was supposed to say something. He coughed a few times to gather his thoughts, and then he spoke. Yes, we talked to him this morning. I didn't think he would get here so quickly. The girl smiled, showing for a moment a row of snow-white teeth. I live very close. Rick would have liked to smack his forehead. What an idiot. He knew that the girl lived in the Institute's dorm, which was literally a few buildings away from the hospital. He looked at his watch. Okay, now I have a round. If you want, you can come with me. We'll talk about work later. Oh, I'd be happy to. What's your name? Reg smiled as the girl pulled a lab coat out of her bag and buttoned it up. My name is Reg. He watched the patients, gave instructions, talked to the boys and girls. At the end of the round, Stacy looked at him in admiration. When they returned to the office, the girl sighed. Are you sure I'll become as good a doctor as you? And do you think I'm a good doctor? Sure. Do you think I came here by chance? 6 months ago, you cured a little girl, our neighbor in the village. How much her parents suffered, how many hospitals they visited. She came to you for a completely different reason, but you could see it all. Now he is as weak as a fiddle. When his mother calls, she says that the girl's mother puts her hands on her head. They are used to the fact that she barely gets up. She is all apathetic. Do you mean Patricia? Rick remembered that girl whom her parents had almost killed because of her lack of brains. For some reason, they thought that the child should drink herbs. They said that they contained vitamins. Our grandparents drank them, and we all should. For several years, they poisoned the child with infusions that the child's body simply did not accept. They managed to bring these infusions to the hospital. Rick rarely lost his patience, but here he ran out. He invited the parents into his office, slammed the door tighter, and let the feelings flow. He not only scolded them to the first degree, but also showed the possible consequences of such vitamins for the child. Of course, Patricia was cured. The parents apparently too, if the girl was now feeling perfectly fine. Exactly, themselves. You see how small the world is. Patricia's mother says that it shook her as if it had woken her up. She sees everything differently now. So it turns out that you are a doctor for adult souls too. Rick laughed. Well, you said it. Sit down. I'll invite the head nurse over and we'll see how we can arrange your schedule. Leslie was a robust woman with a strong, businesslike voice. When she appeared, the nurses unconsciously straightened up, but the woman's expression changed incredibly when she was in front of a child. She spoke softly. Her hands became as soft as feathers. Any child. When he came into her field of vision, he immediately stopped crying. At first, Brett looked at the head nurse with distrust. She saw how the girls were afraid of her, thinking that this relationship interfered with work. But one day, a boy was brought in by ambulance. He fell off the slide in the garden and apparently broke his leg. He screamed and didn't let anyone get close to him. He writhed so much that they feared he would hurt himself even more. His mother was on her way. She wouldn't arrive before about 30 minutes because of traffic. She was constantly on the phone with the caregiver who was trying to get the boy to talk to his mother. For about 10 minutes, there was such a loud squealing in the entire waiting room that almost half the hospital rushed there. And then Leslie appeared. Everyone moved out of the way. Even the boy fell down for a moment, but only to catch his breath. It was at that moment that the head nurse came over to him and started talking. He never started his tantrum again. They even allowed Leslie to give him an injection. And 5 minutes later, the medicine kicked in, and they could finally begin the exam. Rick found Leslie next. She was sitting in her office looking out the window. When he entered, the woman stood up. "Should I submit a resignation?" He was at first taken aback, but then realized that she understood everything, his looks and his dissatisfaction. Now, before going to see her, Rick reviewed her file. 15 years with the children were worth their weight in gold. "Leslie, I came to apologize. I see there is something I need to talk about. You are the best pediatric nurse, and I will be delighted if we can be friends." For the first time in their entire collaboration, Rick saw tears in Leslie's eyes. From then on, they became true friends. Gradually, Rick realized that she did not just handle the children skillfully. Leslie was an expert in her field, both in paperwork and medications. She always had everything in order. As soon as Leslie found out why she had been called, she could not contain herself. "God heard my prayers. At night, everyone has somewhere to go. Everyone has reasons so respectable that you don't know how to say no. Although really, there is only one reason. It's spring outside. And all the nurses are young. The entire department, practically, is supported by those who are married." She turned the conversation to Stasi. "And you, I assume you're not married either?" Stasi shook her head. "No, I'm not married. And I don't plan on being married until I get my diploma. My priority is to establish myself as a doctor, and everything else comes after." Rick looked at her in surprise. It turned out that she sounded just like him, single and a doctor to the core. Stasi started working and Leslie diligently reported on the new nurse's performance. Rick at first didn't understand why, but then he realized that the head nurse thought Stasi was her protégé. He decided to sort everything out right away. He walked into her office. "Leslie, can I come in?" "Sure, Rick, come in. I wouldn't mind at all if you invited me in for a drink or coffee." The woman smiled, and Rick noticed that she even looked younger. He immediately thought that he had never been interested in Leslie's age. To everyone, she was as if she were ageless. "What do you think of cocoa?" "I always drink it. I always make a fresh one to take to work in my thermos." "Cocoa. I haven't had it in 1,000 years, but I like it." As the cocoa was poured into cups and a plate of snacks magically appeared in front of Rick, he began to speak. "Leslie, I think there's been some misunderstanding between us. Stacy is no relation to me. She's the daughter or niece of a friend of the medical director. So you don't need to inform me of her actions. She's completely under your command. You can scold her, praise her, and everything else. Rick, I beg you, did you really think that I didn't know anything about our unit? Of course I know that Stasi came to our city from the village, that she's very ambitious and all that. But I also see that you like her." "What? Friendship? Yes?" "No, Leslie, you're completely wrong. I like skinny, tall girls. Besides, she made a vague gesture near her hair. That hair color of hers. Oh no." Leslie laughed again. "Oh, Rick, you don't really know what you like. Tall, skinny girls are in fashion, so it seems that you like her. It's like with shoes. You'll always love and wear whatever is in fashion. But at home, You'll put on your worn-out slippers with great pleasure and think about how nice it is that no one sees your true love. The analogy was very unusual, and Rex was left thoughtful. Of course, the head nurse was right in one way, but Constancy didn't like him at all. Not at all. But that didn't matter. She wasn't his type, period. But from that day on, Leslie cursed him. There was no other explanation. He saw Stassi all the time. Of course, he had seen her before, but now he constantly fixed his gaze on her. He noticed with dissatisfaction that he had a bust that most girls today wouldn't even think of, and her eyes. When he met her gaze, he inexplicably felt embarrassed, looked away downwards, stumbled over his lips, felt even more uncomfortable with his thoughts, looked down, and felt quite ill. Stassi had been working there for 2 months, had made friends with almost all the nurses instantly. Also, Rick never heard her raise her voice to Leslie. He knew perfectly well that even the medical director was afraid of the head nurse. So, 100%, it wasn't because the girl came on his recommendation. It seems that she was really doing a good job. On one of the summer days, when half of the doctors were on vacation, Rex stayed on night duty. For the first time, he had to share a shift with Stassi. He himself didn't understand if he was happy or disappointed. But one thing was clear: he wasn't going to be able to sleep today. After the afternoon round, Stassi ran to him. "Rek, they need you in the emergency room. There is a little girl in serious condition." He followed her immediately. In the emergency room, there was a little girl of an unnatural white color. Besides crying constantly, she was also vomiting. Next to her was her mother, who did not stop talking for a second. What a little girl. What a little girl. Always sitting. You have to keep an eye on her constantly. As soon as you let your guard down, she has already done something. The little girl looked at her mother with tearful eyes. "It's not true. I don't do that." "What is it?" The woman immediately pushed her away. "Shut up, you wretch. Only trouble comes from you." For the first time, Red saw such treatment of children. Usually when the mother brought the child, she was more scared than the child. And if it was something serious, mothers often fainted right in the emergency room. "Okay, Mom. Don't make the child nervous. Please leave the office." The woman glared at him with a hateful look. "I'm staying here. Pump her stomach. It's filled with some filth. We're going home. Whether you're going home or not, I'll decide." Rick turned his gaze to the girl. She was staring at him with horrified eyes, as if she was seeing a ghost. Stacy lightly touched his arm. "Rick, can I talk to you for a moment?" He had finished examining the girl and nodded. They left the room. The girl was crying, and when her mother wouldn't listen to her, she begged us not to return her to her. "The papers say that she is not her biological daughter. She is her guardian, that woman. Well, or her adoptive mother. Her father is waiting on the street. A peculiar guy, I'll tell you." Rick, before returning to the office, looked out the window. Yes, there he really was, smoking some man. However, his back was turned, and he couldn't see his face. "Well, we'll figure all this out later. We'll hospitalize the girl until we find out what her body is reacting to in this way. Until the tests come back, she'll have to stay in the hospital." "No, she won't stay here. She'll go home." "Listen to me, Mother. The child needs to spend a few days in the hospital. Are you really indifferent to how she feels? She's pretending. She's capable of anything. I know her very well. Come on, Katie, get up. We're going home." Rick grabbed the woman's hand, who kept pointing at the child. "Please be calm. If you don't want to leave the child for treatment, I'll have to go to the police and the protective services. You want to leave her in a safe state for life. You're the foster parents, right?" Rick thought the woman was going to hit him at any moment, but he restrained himself. As they walked out of the office, she whispered, "She'll regret this. I'll find a way to make her pay." When she left, the girl looked at him and whispered, "Thank you." and then she cried bitterly. Rick turned to Stacy. "Put her in a room. Run all the necessary tests. I'll come by in half an hour." "Okay, Rick." He called the hospital director and told him about the incident. "You understand, Lucas? I want to warn you. I have a feeling this woman is going to complain somewhere." "Thanks, Freck. Don't worry. I'll take care of them. And you do what you think is necessary." He filled out the forms. The girl was 8 years old but looked like she was 6. Well, now he could examine her more closely, whether it was poisoning or something more serious. They would find out now, since while the mother was screaming, he couldn't examine her properly. He entered the room quietly. It was already getting dark outside, and strangely, there was no light in the room. Rick walked over to the light switch and stopped. On the bed, Katie was sitting with Stacy. She was holding the girl's hand. They were talking. Or rather, Katie talked and Stacy just listened, asking questions from time to time. Katie cried. Not everything could be understood, but Rick understood what she was saying. "Please don't send me back. I don't want any more. I can't. Daddy Donald always beats us if we do something wrong. We come home from school and are sent straight to the greenhouses, then to the barn. They have a very big farm, but only the 4 of us work there. Do you know what they feed us? My mom brings expired products from the supermarket. She takes everything, even the stuff that's completely moldy. She says it's for the pigs, but the pigs get something better. She's afraid they'll get sick. And we get what's already completely spoiled. I've never eaten. I only eat at school, where we get free food. But yesterday, Daddy Donald got drunk and forced us to eat moldy yogurt. I felt sick right away, and then he hit me in the stomach. So I fell down and felt worse and worse. And this morning he insisted on taking me to the hospital because he got scared. Even though my mum said everything would pass. Stacy asked, "You say you're not alone there?" "No, they have 3 more foster children, all girls. Only they're 10 and 11 years old, and I'm the youngest. I don't know why they chose me. I can't even lift a bucket of oatmeal." Rex's hair stood up. Of course, he'd heard similar stories before, but this time he encountered something like this. Finally, he flipped the switch. "But what are you girls doing sitting in the dark?" Stacy smiled. "We're waiting for you. We get distracted and forget." He got up to prepare Katie for the exam, and suddenly she stood still. Then she raised her bewildered eyes to Rick. He looked at the girl's belly. There was the mark of a man's boot. He didn't say anything and continued to examine the girl. Besides the mark, he found many bruises. Also, the girl was very thin. After half an hour, Lucas was already in his office. He was so outraged that he even grabbed some pills for his nerves. "My granddaughter is 8 years old. She would kill anyone who pushed her. And hear this. I've already called the police. They should arrive any minute." They spent 2 more hours talking to the policeman. Then a woman from social services arrived, apparently to obtain an order to remove the children. When she and the policeman were about to go to the town, she suddenly stopped. "Tell me, can I bring the children here? They also need to be examined. Of course, we will do everything properly." It was already night outside. Lucas went home and Stacy and Rick were sitting in his office. It was he who invited the girl to have coffee. "Stacy, I think no one will be able to sleep anyway. Let's at least have a cup of coffee, okay?" Stacy said thoughtfully. "I don't understand why they start a farm if they can't run it themselves." "Stacy, how can you not understand? If there were no foster children, there would be no farm. It's all a business. Besides the fact that the children work day and night, the state pays them quite well. And they are not their own. They do not feel sorry for them. But how can that be? They have already lost their own parents. They should feel more compassion for them." "Well, Stacy, you think that way because you are human. But they are not." The police and the woman from social services returned at dawn. There was already light in the street. The woman kept repeating, "This is horrible. It is truly horrible." And then it turned out that the police were not allowed in at first. And then, when almost the entire village had gathered in front of the gates, the head of the family, previously convicted of crimes against minors, started shooting. One of the policemen called Rick aside. "Rick, you need to send the girls to another examination." Rick looked up. The policeman sighed. Unfortunately, there are also inhuman people like them. All the policeman's suspicions were confirmed. The man they had arrested that night and his wife were arrested. It turns out that they were not their first wards. Two girls they had taken when they were older ran away as soon as they came of age. They were found and also gave testimony. In addition, it turned out that there was someone in social services willing to give up a child in exchange for money. Lucas used to go to see Rekha often to ask how his patients were feeling and to tell him about the progress of the investigation. Stacia was also brought into the conversation because she was a direct witness of what was happening. Lately, Stasi was spending a lot of time at Katie's house in her free time. Rick saw her several times, even when the girl had a day off. Katie had a lot of new books, a big stuffed rabbit that she slept with. Rick stopped resisting and convincing himself that Stasi didn't like him at all. She liked it, and not only did she like it, but she liked it so much it took her breath away. Recently, Stasi came into his office. "Rick, when is Katie going to be discharged?" "Well, I think next week." Stasi sat down. "I need your help." He honestly freaked out. "Are you there? Did something happen?" "I don't even know how to say it. You see, I can't leave Katie. I can't, period. You have no idea how wonderful and smart she is. She, anyway. I want to adopt her. But I've heard everything. I don't have a place of my own to live. And most importantly, I don't have a husband. I wanted to ask you. After all, you are probably more experienced. What should I do? Maybe there is somewhere where I can find a fake husband." "I don't know what to do," Stacy cried, and he looked at her, not understanding how she didn't notice how big his heart was. Rex sat down next to her. "Stacy, how about after work we go to a restaurant? I'll treat you, but we need a distraction. Then the solution will come by itself, you'll see." She looked at him in surprise and then nodded. "Okay, I agree." By the end of the night, Rick understood a truth. He had fallen deeply in love. The next day, he had the day off. In the morning, he went to see his parents. He needed to talk to someone, and of course, no one but his parents could understand him better. His mother began to set the table, hugging him all the time along the way. "Rick, how have you grown? How long has it been since I saw you?" His father looked at him satisfied. On the sly, he called the hospital director to talk and ask about his son. Lucas always said that they hadn't had a better specialist. He was proud of Rick, but he couldn't show it. When they sat down at the table, his father asked him what was new at work. And Rick told what had happened. His mother couldn't even eat. She was too distraught. "We have to buy something for those girls, especially Katie. They have to get over this. Stasi is such a smart woman. Dad, can't you use your connections to get the girl Katie?" But his father didn't answer. He just looked at his son intently. "Rick, I understand that this isn't all you wanted to tell us, right?" "No, Dad, not all." "You're right. I love Stasi, and I want to ask her to marry me. I understand that in our circles, it's not a common thing. Probably, I came today to avoid misunderstandings between us later. Anyway, I'll make the proposal." There was silence at the table for a while. In the house, the decision-maker was always the father, so now the mother was looking at him. He was a wealthy person, moving in circles where his son's action might not be understood, so she expected some response from him. Finally, he raised his head. "Mum, why are you sitting there?" she asked fearfully. "And what am I supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? Wear Grandma's ring. How is the proposal going to go?" The mother got up from her chair and disappeared into the room. Rick knew that in his family there was a ring that was passed down strictly to daughters or future daughters-in-law. She looked at her father. "Dad, thank you for understanding me." Rex rushed off to work. It was his turn today, but he couldn't wait. Running down the hall, surprising the entire staff, he literally burst into Katie's room. As he thought, Stassi was there. They were reading a book with Katie. They both looked at him in fright. Rick didn't hear the door open behind him. Leslie had come to ask what was going on. "Stacy, marry me. I love you, and I'll try to be a good father to Katie." The older nurse smiled softly and closed the door. Well, everything went exactly as she thought. And it didn't matter that she had sped things up a bit, sending Stassi to Rick for advice, telling the girl that he was almost a computer genius. Actually, I didn't even know if Rick was interested in social media or not. Stacy stood up. "How? Marry? How to love? Did you tell Leslie everything? What did you tell her?" "Well, I just told her." One girl realized that she had said something too much and fell silent, bewildered. Then, Katie, smiling, said, "Rick, Stacy, Leslie said that she loves you. They thought I was asleep, but I heard everything." Stacy blushed, and Rick smiled. "Well, it seems that everything is developing as it should. Here, Stacy, this is the ring that passes through our female line. Tomorrow we are going to the registry office and then to my parents' house. We need you to take it. They won't forgive you if you don't." She timidly offered him her hand, and Rick put the ring on it. They were greatly helped by that woman from social services. When they arrived at the restaurant after the registry office, she was waiting for them. "May I make the first gift?" She approached Katie and handed her a folder with documents. "Here, Katie, I congratulate you on having new parents. And to you, my dears, on having a wonderful little girl." Katie ran to Stassi and Rick, hugged them both. Rick picked her up in his arms. At that moment, Stassi and Rick's parents were nearby. For a moment, everyone forgot about the guests. Life went on. It just took a turn towards a new stage. We could say that they reached a new level.